Start over. You ready?
We're good to go.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. I'm Cheryl Roller, and I'm the VP of Advocacy and Education at the League of Women Voters of Metro Columbus. Welcome to our presentation on truth and democracy, misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. This is presented by the League of Women Voters Metro Columbus Advocacy and Education Committee. We will have two speakers tonight. The first one will be Chelsey Cartwright, who comes to us from the U.S. League of Women Voters, where she is the project manager for Truth and Democracy. Our second presenter will be Mary Mogan Edwards, who is a local freelance writer and editor. We're also happy to welcome and recognize various board members of the Metro Columbus League of Women Voters. Welcome to Kristen Sutton, our president. Welcome to Anna Banks-Simeon, Vice President of Voter Services. Welcome to Karen Johnson, another current board member. And also welcome and thank you to Sophia Lombardo, our operations manager. Go ahead to the next slide. I want to start with an important word about the League of Women Voters of Metro Columbus. First of all, we are always nonpartisan. We never endorse parties or candidates. Our mission is to educate and engage voters and safeguard democracy. And we fully embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you'll find more details on each of these policies in our chat. Let's go on to the agenda. Our agenda is going to consist of a quick look at some ground rules. Then we'll come back and I'll introduce our first speaker and she'll make her presentation. Then I will introduce our second presenter and she'll make her presentation. And then we will have a question and answer and a discussion. Our discussion tonight is going to be very important. So as you're listening to all of this, we need to be thinking about what our plan should be. What can we do? Because we're in a very challenging time and we need to figure out how we help other people understand the difference between true information and misinformation. Next slide, please. So, ground rules. During the presentation, we'll keep all participants other than the speakers muted. And we'd like you to put your questions in the chat, and the moderator will combine those questions and ask the questions at the end. So remembering that the League is always nonpartisan, please be sure to pose your question in a respectful and nonpartisan manner. And the best way to do that is think about what is the underlying issue, regardless of who is taking the action. Okay, next slide. Now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Chelsey Cartwright. Chelsey is a graduate of Emerson College in Boston, where she got her degree in broadcast journalism. She's always been a longtime activist, and she currently serves as the program manager for the Democracy Truth Project at the League of Women Voters United States. In this body of work, she strives to counter dis and misinformation, and to advance a better public understanding of the democratic and electoral process. Chelsey works with leagues nationwide to develop and implement trainings and events that advance that mission. Chelsey, please begin.
Thank you, Cheryl, and thank you everyone for being here this evening. We're going to jump right into how we can combat mis, dis, and malinformation. This presentation is all about staying aware and activating truth. Two things that we can do really well in this political climate we find ourselves in. We can go to the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about what grounds our democracy. These two quotes really sum it up. To get a better understanding of how democracy functions, democracy cannot succeed unless those who express their choice are prepared to choose wisely. The real safeguard of democracy, therefore, is education. Uh, Former President Franklin Delano Roosevelt really summed this up because a lot about mis and disinformation and all it stands for is about being educated and understanding those aspects of what brings this together. And then civic participation, what we do in our leagues across the country, civic participation over a lifetime, working in neighborhoods and communities and service of all kinds, military and civilian, full-time and part-time, national and international, will strengthen America's civic purpose. Former U.S. Senator John McCain there. This is what it's all about. When we build networks of community through our leagues, we strengthen our understanding and awareness as trusted messengers. Next slide, please. So, for a little bit in the chat here, I'd love to hear your perspective just to start everything out here. What concern motivates you the most to help your community address mis, dis, and malinformation? Just share your thoughts in the chat. Is it that people won't vote? That the outcome of the election will be compromised? That people won't trust the outcome? There could be violence? Or is it that something else that please do share in the chat that stands out to you? I'd love to hear about your perspectives when we think about how best to address mis, dis, and malinformation. Again, mis, dis, and malinformation is nothing new. It's propaganda, it's sensationalism, things that we've all dealt with. But how are you understanding how best to anchor yourselves in community to address it? Next slide, please. So when we talk about mis, dis, and malinformation, it's really key to understand the landscape, both the scale and the scope of what we're dealing with has really amplified. Mis, dis, and malinformation is spreading rapidly on social media. It's become a fact of life. This is just the general landscape of what we're dealing with. There's cycles of fear and polarization, but understanding that there's many different ways that we can understand this landscape, and there's no one approach to dealing with mis, dis, and malinformation. So understanding the different approaches and how we navigate is really key. Next slide, please. So let's get down to some of the definitions of what mis, dis, and malinformation is. Misinformation is defined as false or inaccurate information. Disinformation is false information, but it's intended to mislead. So there is malicious content there, and a malicious intent rather. And malinformation is based on fact, but used out of context to mislead, harm, or manipulate. So disinformation is the most pervasive. Its aim is to deliberately disrupt, amplify mistrust, and it's layered with distortions. It sows doubt and confusion. And again, mis, dis, and malinformation all pose a significant threat to the security and well-being of us as citizens, as you know, as people are spending more time than ever online. And I'm looking in the chat here. I'm seeing that there are things that you all feel people won't vote. There's apathy. There's also too much information. There's so much to even take in. Not voting with belief, it doesn't matter, and people aren't informed. So all of those things really are key into understanding how we can address mis, dis, and malinformation. Next slide, please. So there's a layered approach in the tactics and how we can find key forms of addressing problematic content online. A couple of different examples of this largely include missing context. So, are images missing? Is information lacking? Where are the details? Making sure that folks that content is anchored in details and has Relevant information. Faulty logic is when there's logical fallacies like false equivalencies or a straw man argument. One thing just doesn't make sense, and that might lead to a false equivalence of one thing over the other. Hate and dog whistles. These are themes that divide based on identity, are very hot button, and you know, issues that deal with uh, obviously hate and things that are based on pitting one group of people against another group of people. Conspiracies. So, conspiracies often lack clear information. There's also a lot of rumors, blaming a boogeyman for things that are hard to understand, or using scapegoats as a way to, um, uh, you know, throw one group or the other under the bus. And old content, something that might once have been relevant, may not be relevant today. So it does not have to be false to be a problem. You just thinking of, these different tactics are how purveyors of mis and disinformation go about putting bad information out there. And we'll go through each to share an example. So next slide, please. So this is a example of missing content. This was a tweet from uh, the current president, a former tweet about illegal aliens are far more likely to commit federal crimes based on statistics. They are 7% of the population, yet they commit those different statistics of different crimes. Well, this is a prime example of there's information that is contextual that is missing. The, we don't know the total population. Is this just for the United States? Is this for a certain state? There are ideas or information that are missing here that are being manipulated in order to disinform. Next slide, please. So, faulty logic. This example is logical fallacies that come in many forms, such as a false equivalency, grabbing for straws, thinking that one thing must certainly lead to another, and a slippery slope, that meaning that, you might be falling down a rabbit hole, or not understanding the full breadth of the issue. This example is about you want me to take a vaccine, mail it to me, and I'll vaccinate myself and mail back the paperwork. You trust me, right? Just like like mail-in voting. This obviously is a faulty logic. The vaccines were never about mail-in voting. They were never about understanding that vaccines are what medical professionals administer, and they always have been verified. So this faulty logic is a one way that this can pull one thing from another and trying to connect the dots when some things just don't add up logically. Next slide, please. So again, taking information that might be old and out of date, that's not relevant, and using that information to be reshared on social media is a prime example of how misinformers and disinformers operate. This tweet says, amazing, but not shocking at all anymore. Nearly 200,000 Florida voters may not be citizens. And this was a tweet from 2018. But as you can see, the data on elections is from 2012. So that's faulty in terms of the dates not adding up. It's not no longer relevant information, and therefore it's out of date and not applicable. Next slide, please. So let's get down to the why around mis and disinformation being spread There's a lot of different reasons why mis and disinformation is put out there. There might be political motivations, ideological beliefs, or financial incentives. Again, some things might be a little bit more lighthearted for amusement. There might be more nefarious things, such as revenge, extortion, or harassment. We've all seen AI manipulated images and videos, and all the producers of this content hope to benefit is from a poorly informed population, and they want to manipulate this content to their advantage to deter folks from factual and information that's based in truth. Next slide, please. And so, touching on why folks believe in mis and dis and malinformation, there's an emotional connection that it plays upon people's emotional and cognitive abilities. Sometimes folks go to it as a way to calm fears, anxieties, and angers. It's often sometimes based in a small kernel of truth, which makes it somewhat believable. We've all been susceptible to this. So people are looking for and interpreting information that sinks in with their belief system and their confirmation bias. So they're looking for that information. And while on that path of looking for information, you might come up against mis and disinformation. Again, the most effective bad actors and misleading campaigns, they combine a variety of these strategies. They might be playing on people's emotions, trying to get a reactionary rise out of them, maybe putting in some semblance of truth in something that's really taken out of proportion and it's not accurate. Next slide, please. So in the chat, I'd love to hear from you again. How are you encountering mis, dis, and malinformation? Was it online? Was it in person? Was it through some what source did you find it from? Where did you find it? And what was your initial reaction? How did it make you feel? And what did you do when you found it? Did you push back on the person that was putting out this mis, dis, and malinformation, or did you report the findings? Would love to hear from folks in the chat, and we'll highlight some of those as we go along. Next slide, please. So, yes, and I see in the slides, some people believe that it's on the internet, so it must be true. This next section that we're going in will definitely speak to that because we're going to be talking about the rise of AI. So, again, artificial intelligence, it's the new norm here. We're having to understand what AI will mean as a resource and also as something that will make it more challenging to navigate mis and disinformation. Artificial intelligence adds another heightened element of risk to dis and misinformation. A report from NewsGuard, which is an organization that measures the credibility of news online, identified 49 websites producing news content that was completely AI generated. So, you know, being aware of the rise of AI and what it will mean on our news environment is really, really key. Generative AI is advanced at pushing out this disinformation in a way that's sometimes even more persuasive than human generated content. So being aware of when you might see a AI generated video or AI generated deep fakes, videos or audio, and being aware of what makes those things different and taking inventory of that will be helpful. Next slide, please. AI provides a cheap and easily accessible way for bad actors to generate a lot of content. The speed and ease of AI has intensified and makes for swift content creation with micro-targeted approaches. Generative AI models are themselves a target for disinformation, as manipulators can poison the output that they're putting in the information by feeding harmful content on the front end, and putting it in on the input to get that output that will be disinforming and misinforming. The factors can further complicate the challenge of finding truthful information online. Um, and so, just being aware of the total impact that it has is really important, because this is a game change in terms of AI will be around, and it will be here to stay. Um, Obviously, AI has some good, it's great for efficiency and note taking, streamlining, things like that. But the more pervasive side of it is that bad actors are manipulating it, and to ratchet up the way they're putting out information online. Next slide, please. So, being better aware of it means to know that it's being on the rise. Experts at the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies estimate that 99% of content on the internet will be AI generated by 2025 to 2030. So, just being underscoring the relevance of what it means to notice when AI generated content, whether that be manipulated images, manipulated audio, deep fake videos, which are videos that are spliced together, that are not consistent in terms of how they've been produced. Generative AI chat box fueled disinformation, and there isn't sometimes a clear boundary between fact and fiction. So manipulators of AI, they seek to poison or strategically shape those outputs. Like I said, in putting in that bad information on the input. And so, next slide, please. The How do we disrupt this system in terms of being aware of AI, but also understanding that, AI, the the impact that it will have on myths and disinformation. Our lived experience is the number one disruptor to how we can be more aware of the spread of myths and disinformation, and build community, build conversations to disrupt it. So building that community resistance through trainings like this one, we get the power back directly in our hands to understand what it's going to take to be aware of how to change, the way in which we're navigating mis and disinformation, and also how we can push back. Folks who are anchored in our communities, we know them best when we're connected to local election officials, local news outlets, community events and activities. We have a deep understanding of what's going on in our communities, and we become those trusted messengers. Building that trust is vital and essential to having these conversations that anchor trust, that anchor accurate information, and encouraging our networks to push back. Obviously, not getting in head to head battles with bad actors online. Don't recommend that. But just being understanding that as we build these networks of trust, we become better equipped to get those in our networks to be building awareness as well. And it's a collective sense of pushing back as a community. Next slide, please. So again, just as mis and disinformation isn't a single issue to underscore with a single solution, we must tackle mis and disinformation as a collective. So understanding that one size fits all approach doesn't work here, but being aware of the nuances and complexities that mis and disinformation is all about is really key to understanding it better, and to be educated on how we can disrupt. Knowing that many communities, different communities, especially Communities of color are direct targets of mis and disinformation. They are being underrepresented and are affected, and being aware of how to unravel that mis and disinformation and how it's connecting with our immigrant communities, our Black and Brown communities, our unhoused communities, knowing that we have to be aware that those communities are being affected at a different uh, rate is key to unraveling that mis and disinformation. The better prepared we are to call it out and share with others how to do so, that strengthens our awareness and how we are able to, build strategies up to push back. Next slide, please. So, cultivating these meaningful conversations that anchor the truth are really important. The ethics and the integrity behind our news is really, really key. Working with partner organizations that renew trust in our democracy. Right now is a very shaky time for our democracy. It's on life support right now. And so, how are we elevating awareness and around polarization about how the news is being reported, but also how mis and disinformation is really making it hard for independent news and local news to thrive. So we've got to lean into those community connections that foster our sense of empowerment to reduce harm. Building up trusted messengers in your network and community is the best way to do that. And this all has a ripple effect, because the more we're able to have these conversations, the better we are at centering truth and centering that as a foundation in what we're doing to disrupt mis and disinformation. Next slide, please. So let's go into a few do's and don'ts when we're thinking about when we are met with mis and disinformation. Verifying information before you share it is super important. You want to make sure that the information that you're sharing is accurate, actionable, and aspirational. Before sharing the correct information, because again, we don't want to get into these battles with bad actors, but pause and reflect before leading with a response that anchors the facts. So don't be reactionary. Just take a few moments, collect the facts of the matter, and then focus on building solutions. You don't have to be defensive or respond angrily, but take a few moments to gather a response that leads with the facts and doesn't just jump in as a way to really, push back immediately. Next slide, please. So, when we're met with mis and disinformation, it's really crucial to read beyond the headline. There's a lot of different takes on articles that are not just those first few lines of a headline that might be catching our attention. So, conducting a quick fact check of the information. Can those facts be verified? Fact checking is so important. Not just in what we see as political discourse and debates, but in our news that we get every day. Again, how social media has transformed and made itself into a place for where news is shared. It's really in the kind of the moments, the bright moments of how news on social media is shared is different than if we're going to be scrolling a website for news. So understanding, can those facts be verified? Double check the source. Who is the source behind the news? Is the journalist a trusted journalist? Are they from a reputable news source? Consider the source and the source's source, and analyze information critically. Thinking critically, and thinking in terms of, why is this information out there? Who is this information targeted to? Doing a little bit more of running through the motions of reading through the full scope of the article, it will be really key here. Next slide, please. So back to how we cultivate that awareness on social media. The SIFT method is really important. Taking those few moments to stop, investigating the source, finding better coverage, and tracing claims to the original source. So using this as a way to, okay, am I getting all of the complete information? Am I getting a clear picture of what this article is meant to share, what this news is meant to share? Are we going to develop a situational awareness, excuse me, or informational awareness, being keen to all the information that's out there, understanding that the algorithm can lead to echo chambers or down rabbit holes when it comes to content. So being aware of that, just being mindful, and have a healthy skepticism, ask questions. If it doesn't seem right and if there aren't facts that can be verified, question that. Know that trolls and bots are out there, and social media companies, unfortunately, are backing off on enforcement. And so, that is definitely something to be mindful of. Disinformation is both top down and bottom up, and participatory between bad actors and online crowds. So, these bad actors, their whole purpose is to get folks engaged with them, to get a rise out of people. And so, using this situational awareness on social media, well, the next time you encounter mis and disinformation, you'll be better primed to not just react but to take some steps, to take inventory. Next slide, please. So what can you do? You can share information to disrupt. Sharing information through conversations, through trainings, through building networks of trusted messengers. Activate your networks to amplify the impact. So how can we do that? Staying connected to local independent news sources. That's very, very key. We know that there's cuts to the corporation, to public broadcasting, as long with PBS and other many local independent news stations. But stay connected to what you can do, to stay with your ear on the ground to those organizations, those news organizations. Ask questions and stay curious. Hosting discussion groups and reading circles. Folks can share information or share, hey, have you heard about this? Have you heard about what's going on here on different issues? I mean, there's not a shortage of issues that are happening in the news right now. And so you can find one that speaks to you, and sharing information in order to anchor those facts. Fostering civic education and civic integrity really goes a long way to get folks plugged in, especially on a local level, whether that be a school committee or a city council, making sure that folks are aware of what's going on locally in their communities. And then training your base on how to spot disinformation. And then, of course, shameless plug for Vote 411, the best resource to get that accurate election information out there, and lead with that. Once you have information that's been verified, use that as the launching pad. And so joining with partner groups that counter mis and disinformation. There's also, ways to partner with your local board of elections or your local election officials. We know that election officials are truly heroes of our democracy. So how can we work with them on a local level to get information back to the community? Next slide, please. So a little bit on inoculation here. This is really important on how to get your audience to recognize mis, dis, and malinformation as incorrect, false information. Create that balance with trusted messengers. When you are utilizing trusted messengers to push back on false information, and minimize and prevent amplification, lean on those your audience trusts most. But with that inoculation, you want to point out the mis and disinformation so folks are understanding it as mis and disinformation, but don't shut down there, using debunking as a way to show that mis and disinformation is on the rise, but to limit the spread is a way to say this information is false and here's why. And then you share the most accurate information that's led with facts and been verified. Next slide, a bit more on inoculation. So the first step here is discrediting the false information, naming the motivations driving the disinformation, understanding that this information is false, it's been verified as false. Call out the false information without repeating it because we don't want to spread it further. But, you know, calling that out. And then the step three is delivering the factual information to combat that falsehood, because we definitely want to always anchor inoculation with the correct information and to combat the bad information. Next slide, please. A bit on debunking here. So debunking is a truth sandwich. You want to start with the truth and name the fact. And then the second piece here, state why the falsehood that you found is false and why. And then third, always end with restating the truth and pointing to a trusted resource or source that can verify this truth. The goal here is to diffuse confusion and point directly to the falsehood without amplifying it further. So using that truth as a way to anchor and stabilize, the falsehood is in there, but you're also countering it with the truth. Next slide. A little bit more on debunking here. Emphasize what's true over what is wrong. Always introduce the core fact. Again, before presenting the false information, you want to lead with that factual information. That makes it much more attainable in you showing that you're leading with the truth. But before speaking on the untruth, say that it's not true. The upcoming information isn't true, so you don't directly repeat that falsehood. And then at the close of the debunking, you fill that information void on what's been created, what's been verified as a fact. Clarity is the key here. And again, with this, visuals and graphics help to visualize these facts more vividly. So keep that in mind. But underscoring that the truth, leading with the truth there, and taking away from the harm of that falsehood will really have that'll be how debunking really shines. Next slide, please. I want to close by sharing that we do have Democracy in Your Hands webinars. They are happening each month from now until October. We've also had plenty of webinars throughout the summer on media literacy. We had one on finding the facts in our elections, which took key aim to understand how election administration has been targeted in mis and disinformation. And we just had a great session last month on civic identity and understanding why the issues that matter to you do. So we actually have tomorrow a session on a webinar on the 3 branches of government. It'll be tomorrow at 12:30. Hope you all can join us. And then lastly, next slide, please. Would love for you all to be active in our democracy integrity briefings, both the democracy integrity briefings along with the Democracy in Your Hands series. They tie in the key elements of the Democracy Truth Project with what we're hoping to accomplish with Unite and Rise. So at these democracy integrity briefings, you'll get you'll get the growing trends, top lines of mis and disinformation on a local, state, and national level, and we'll share with you strategies on how to combat that. So those are the second Tuesday of every month at 3:30 Eastern. And finally, last slide is our resource guide. So here we have a blog on mis and disinformation, some information from the News Literacy Project, who is one of our partner organizations, and some great tools and resources. Rumor Guard, News Guard, PolitiFact. These are all fact-based, fact-checking organizations that work to dismantle mis and disinformation, along with a few other tools from the Trust Project, Common Cause, and LWV of Alameda County has this amazing game called Verify It, which is all about media literacy. So I with that will share it back to Cheryl, and looking forward to answering any questions at the end of our presentation.
Thank you, Chelsey. That was really a lot of really great ideas that we can use to help people identify what's true and to actually help safeguard democracy. So thank you, Chelsey. Next, we'll move on to our next speaker, which is Mary Mogan Edwards. And I want to note that in having Mary as part of our presentation today, we're doing exactly one of the things that Chelsey just suggested. One of her things was to stay connected to local news sources. So that's why we've got Mary here with us. So Mary is a Columbus native. She was a communications major at The Ohio State University. She's a respected journalist, a former editorial page opinion writer for the Columbus Dispatch. She was with the Dispatch for 35 years. She covered local government, schools, higher education, the environment, and public policy. She's now a freelance journalist. Her work has also appeared in the Toledo Blade, the Dayton Daily News, and the Akron Beacon Journal. So, Mary, please proceed with your presentation. We're looking forward to what you're going to add here.
Thank you. And I want to thank the League, and I especially want to thank Chelsey and who all ever was responsible for this excellent presentation, because I borrowed from it quite shamelessly when I was asked in June to give a talk on the same topic, and it was really helpful. And I will start this one like I started that one, which is to say that I am not a scholar of misinformation or fact-checking or anything else, just a longtime local journalist who is concerned about the excess quantity and inadequate quality of information that's out there these days. Cheryl asked me to share with you just one little part of that presentation, which dealt with a couple of sites designed to help evaluate bias and or accuracy in news sources. Just a couple of caveats to start. These are just two of no doubt many such sources. Chelsey mentioned NewsGuard, which sounded similar. I don't suggest these two are the best, just they're good examples. And also I note that I am just talking about each of these has a media bias chart, which is kind of the thing that a lot of people zero in on, but each of the sites does a lot more than that. Second, I'm not a regular user of them, so I'm not highly expert. So if they intrigue you, it's up to you to learn how to use them fully. And I hope that we all understand that there is no such thing as totally unbiased reporting or journalism, because it's done by people. And there are many news sources with definite political bias that nonetheless do accurate and high quality news reporting, and so they're valuable. The key is recognizing the bias and understanding where it comes from. That makes that source usable. Next slide. The first of these sites is called All Sides, and it's very simple. It just ranks, its chart, I should say, just ranks sources from left to right. It's left leans left, center leans right, and right. They do this with a combination of a panel of experts and then sort of wiki style input. That's my term for people around the country. I think there's a process you can go through to volunteer to analyze a given article or episode, and based on that, they'll that will figure into their rankings. All Sides does not evaluate sites for accuracy, saying that they can't be a ministry of truth. And I believe they're right about that. And I'll talk more about that later. They're right that there is not a valid authority on what's true in the news. But I do think that not attempting to address it at all kind of limits the usefulness of this site. Next slide. This site is called Ad Fontes, which is Latin for to the sources, and it ranks news on two axes. The bias from left to right is shown on the bottom there, and on the vertical axis they have their measure of what they call news value and reliability, and that kind of has to do with how many, I don't know, original sources or fact-based or whatever. I'm not well versed in their method, but so to my mind anyway, the ideal site would be the ones at the center at the top, because they have very little left-right bias and they're high in their accuracy. If this were more legible, and I apologize that it's not, but you would see things up there in the sweet spot. You'd see things like PBS NewsHour, ProPublica, the Associated Press, things like that. If you move a little bit to the right, it's right under the Wall Street Journal, the WSJ there for the Wall Street Journal. That's the Orange County Register. It's a legacy newspaper in California, known to be right-leaning on its editorial page, but very respected for its accuracy and integrity. A left-leaning equivalent, a little bit further down and a little bit to the left, is the NBC News website. And interestingly enough, People magazine would not have guessed that. And then where you're really in trouble is down at the bottom on the far left and far right corners, that are low in their accuracy and lots of bias. And the one on the extreme left is called the Hartman Report, and on the right is something called NutraTruth. So next slide. This is a look at TV and video outlets. And again, you see PBS NewsHour and legacy TV news networks at the top. In the bad actor corner on the right, you'll see Alex Jones's InfoWars. On the left, this Ad Fontes didn't find any site on the left that is as inaccurate or quite as biased as InfoWars, but I guess the worst, among the worst you'll find is MSNBC's All In with Chris Hayes. I know it's hard to see they're on these axes there, their definitions, but it rated the Chris Hayes show as edging toward hyperpartisan left for bias and for reliability, selective or incomplete, unfair persuasion. So next slide. This is the podcast and audio sources. And next slide. This is all three categories together. Obviously, if you were looking at this online, you would be able to zoom in or click on an individual thing to get more information. Excuse me, next slide, please. On those first three, I only included the chart part to make it as big as possible. But if you were using this online, you would also have this control panel. That's where you can filter for what type of site you see, and a couple other filters there. You can see the search box. So Cheryl, I'm sorry, were you able to put in that other additional slide I sent? Okay, yes. So let's go to the next slide. The search box lets you search for a single news site. And if they have it, you can click on it, and then just that site will show up. Here, this is CBS News. You can see it's fairly just, slightly to the left in its bias and fairly high on reliability. The little dots around it represent specific articles or episodes. And when you click on any one of those, you get a little box that tells you some particulars about the article or episode. And you can also click through, depending on paywall, you can click through and actually read it or watch it. And now I recognize that I've offered a lot of caveats here about this, and I hope the takeaway from that is that this is not an easy business. It's not a simple thing. It's highly subjective to try to rank these for their subjectivity. You know, it's just where it's human beings create this content, human beings rank this content. So it's going to be inconsistent. But in the environment that we're in today, I think it's worth the effort, if you are unfamiliar with a site, to get some idea of how others see it. And the other thing I said I would get back to was the idea of trying to determine absolute truth in a news item. You know, why can't we just make it illegal to write untrue things in journalism? I mean, besides the First Amendment, it's difficult. And an example of that is in 2021, the Biden administration, Department of Homeland Security set out to create a board to monitor national security threats that arise from disinformation. It was supposed to monitor the campaigns that we know are happening by Russia and China and other adversaries, and then they were going to report to Congress on best practices for combating disinformation. Well, this was immediately branded by both sides as a ministry of truth and highly criticized. You could say that it ironically fell victim to a classic. And so that never got off the ground. And kind of in a related vein, here in Ohio, in the past, Ohio election law prohibited spreading false statements to promote the election, nomination, or defeat of a candidate. And in 2010, the anti-abortion group Susan B. Anthony List paid for a billboard claiming that a Democratic congressional candidate had voted, quote, for taxpayer-funded abortions because he had voted for the Affordable Care Act. It's not true. The Affordable Care Act does not have taxpayer-funded abortions. The candidate filed a complaint about those ads, but the Susan B. Anthony List challenged the law in court, saying that that a ban on lies violated its First Amendment rights. And the U.S. Supreme Court allowed the case to go forward, and a federal judge in Cincinnati struck down the law. And if, just in case you are inclined to draw any conclusions about partisan bias because of that ruling, the judge was Obama appointee Timothy Black, and he was the same guy who 1 year later made history by ruling in favor of gay marriage in the Obergefell case. His ruling on the election law was based on a narrow interpretation of the First Amendment, but he also noted that we don't really want the government determining what's true and what's not. And as a side note, it wasn't that useful, because litigating the truth of the claim, it usually took it beyond election day anyway. So it kind of wasn't that useful. All that is to say, just to repeat the idea that it's a difficult business it's not simple to decide what's true and what's false. But as you could see from Chelsey's presentation, it kind of lies at the heart of the disinformation problem. So it's an effort worth making, but it's not a simple thing. And that is all I have. So thank you very much. I'll stand by.
Thank you, Mary. I asked Mary to present this because I found that whole concept fascinating, and I'd heard different people give generalities about different news sources, but I was not aware until her previous presentation and this one right now about that there were organizations out there that help you identify what the bias is of a different news source that you're listening to, which goes back to the thing that we all know: we need to get our news from multiple sources. But thank you very much, Mary. I just saw one question in the chat, and if you have other questions, please put them in right now. But the question I saw was for either of our presenters. What are some tips that you can give on how to recognize an AI generated content? How to recognize it?
Sure. So with AI generated content, you'll usually see you'll see like discrepancies with the frame of the image if things look too condensed, or if there's if it's grainy imaging, or the video quality uh is not done well. That's a way to spot AI manipulated content. Also, there's a lot of sometimes splicing images that show up. If it seems like there's not continuity in the video, and if it's like a little choppy, there that might mean it's AI generated. Also, if there's audio issues, if the feedback is off, or if there seems like there's been a manipulation with the voiceovers of the video, or the folks talking in the video. That's one way to spot that as well. But just, understanding that there's a lot of different AI generated video content, but also, memes, things that might be a little bit lighthearted, social media posts and things like that, images that may have been manipulated. That all goes back to AI. So just kind of taking a few steps back, if it doesn't seem like it all comes together in terms of continuity, and like if it doesn't look like something that you've seen previously, that might be a good way to take a few steps back and ask questions about it.
Mhm. Thank
This
you, Chelsea.
doesn't,
Go ahead, Mary. Anything
uh,
you can add to that?
yeah, I mean, this does not specifically address AI falseness, but just in terms of the words and the ideas, as Cheryl's presentation, I'm sorry, as Chelsey's presentation pointed out, the method and the goal of most disinformation is to get you upset, to outrage you. And if you read something that does that, I'm guessing most people on this call are probably sober consumers of information. But if something just is outrageous and makes you angry, um, there's a better chance that someone is doing, that's its intent, and that it might not be genuine.
Excellent. I see another question, this one from Mary Blackburn. Now that CBS has merged with Skydance, do you think their coverage and or bias will change? Either one.
I confess I'm not informed enough about Skydance. Is that like British, or I don't remember what Skydance is. I would, depending on that outlet, yes, I would say there is a chance when there's different ownership, but I don't know enough about the particulars to have an actual guess about what it might be.
Well, and I think the conclusion to that question is we should not expect it to be the same. We
Yeah,
should figure out what the new bias will be, because like Mary Edwards said, every source has some bias. So we should assume that CBS's bias will change a little bit, and we'll have to figure out which way it'll go, both both horizontally and vertically. All right. At this point, I'd like to open it up for the discussion about where do we go from here. I'd like to hear from board members and from league members about what you think are the specific actions that we should take on as a league. And please raise your hand and Sophia will unmute you so that you can ask the question. And because we'd like to give everybody a chance to speak here, we'll go through every question or every comment before we go back for repeats. So who would like to start with a comment on how you think our league should be using this? What new things should we take on? What things should we revise? Let's see who's got their hand up. Anna, please go ahead.
Thank you. I think one of the things we might want to try, and I exchanged a text with Chelsey before, because a lot of this information is available to league members. We're always fortunate, but we need to get this information out to the community and to people who might be league members if they knew they could get this good information. So one of the things I think we might want to introduce is let's add maybe 20 minutes or 30 minutes to some of our meetups for new members. We have quarterly activities for people who are thinking about joining and have recently joined. And to have anything like this or to just target this information would be so useful. So everyone would have something, even just a kernel to go back to other organizations and their other networking circles to share.
Great idea. Who's next? Who would like to make the next comment? How do we use this? Go ahead, Kitty. Kitty, you're still on mute. Sophia will get you here.
There we go. I have a few random comments that may not necessarily connect, but it may point to some thinking about what we could do. I'm worried about the deluge of information that is coming at us every day from all sides, and the fact that most people are really, really busy and don't have the time or the inclination to do the kind of research that we're seeing that will help us discern the truth from the not so much truth. So that's one comment. I'm concerned that I don't know enough about how AI is being regulated or not being regulated. And I would certainly like to know more about that. And then the third kind of unconnected comment has to do with civil discourse. When we start talking about conversations with people and trying to come to what the truth is, I think it goes hand in hand with civil discourse, because it's really hard to talk about that with people who might have a totally different opinion based on whatever. So connecting it to civil discourse to me is kind of important. And how all that fits and what we should do, I'm not sure. But, there needs to be a busy person's guide to, finding out the truth. And it sounds light, and I don't mean it to be light or facetious, but it's got to be something that people can look at and say, oh yeah, I can do that. So
let me react to that. Kitty, what do you think would be helpful? I mean, should we create a new brochure specifically about a busy person's guide to finding the truth and start providing that at all events and tabling events? Like you, I worry about too much information.
And so I don't know if it starts out as a program that we develop and present, and then maybe if it turns out to be really well received, then maybe there's a way to extract and put something in writing that can be disseminated far more broadly than say one or two programs that the league might have. So I wouldn't start out by printing a brochure. I'd start out by trying to figure out how a busy person can do this. You know, because I looked at that and I thought, well, I'm retired and I can't take this deluge of information and research every little. I feel comfortable with the truth. And I think there'll be resistance because some of the misinformation is coming from our highest elected officials who some people trust. And so getting through that particular barrier, I think, gets to the civil discourse business. But I think, I think this is an uphill battle. I don't think it's one we should ignore by any means, but I think it's not a piece of cake.
No.
And I don't want to be a naysayer and Debbie Downer. I'm not trying to be that at all. I'm just thinking in my own mind, how do you attack this thing and make it doable and useful? That's it.
That's very helpful. It looks like Teddy's got her hand up. Teddy, go ahead, please.
I don't have video. I don't know what's wrong with my computer, but anyway, I promote the League's information on candidates and issues, our 411 information, and I really, really hope we can recruit a lot more candidates to give us their information, their resume, and also their feeling on issues, so that it makes our site a lot more relevant to those voters. So I think getting out that information on candidates and issues is probably the biggest things that I promote.
Excellent. And we're so glad that you're doing that. Obviously, our Vote 411 resource is a really great thing. Other comments? Not seeing any other hands up, but please.
Karen Johnson's hand is up.
Oh, good. Karen, go right ahead, please.
Thank you. I was having trouble hearing when my video was on, so hopefully you can still hear me.
Yes.
But I agree that the Vote 411 is key. I was, with my nieces, my younger nieces over the past few days and asking them how they get their information. And they didn't know about Vote 411. So I was wondering, how can we get that more out to the broader community that exists? And, is it with media? I don't know, but I think that is such a valuable resource to get true and good information on candidates. And if we can get that out there more, where more people know about it, I think that would be great.
That would go a long way. About particular races and elections and issues. But there's the whole other everyday news that still has to be evaluated for where you're hearing the truth in everyday reporting. But that's a great idea to keep promoting Vote 411. Any other comments?
Mary Edwards.
Sorry, I feel silly. I can't find the little hand raising button, but not to be Debbie Downer. I just want to express, I guess, admiration and encouragement for you to keep trying to do what we in newspapers used to call the voter's guide, which I confess I'm not even sure the Dispatch does it anymore. We used to print a big old, printed version of it. And when I was an editorial writer, we did that in our department, and it got harder and harder because candidates just simply would not submit to it because it's a chance for them to be attacked. They'd rather say nothing and go on whatever their ads, and you know how unreliable an ad probably is as a true look at a candidate. And I just found that really discouraging that it got harder and harder to get candidates to fill out the little form where they answered questions. So not to say don't do it, do it, because again, I don't know that newspapers are doing it quite as much as they used to, and I'm sure they don't print one anymore. So I think that's a very important work, but maybe getting harder.
Thank you. Let's see, I see Anna's hand up and Karen's hand up. So we'll go back to Anna first and then Karen.
Okay, I wanted to make a couple of comments because we do have literature that covers fact, mis and disinformation. And we also have all the literature on Vote 411. We will use those as we always do at different events when we're tabling, and especially for things like National Voter Registration Day. We have that sort of material. So it's not like we'd have to make anything else new. But one of the things I want to encourage everyone to do is to volunteer for some of these activities, because the more the merrier. Right now must be a scary time for most people, and anything that we do, we need to do it in small bites. I'm thinking when people voluntarily sign up and show up at the meetups, which end up being very, very nice. They really are. You don't really have to be brand new to come. So come to the next one. There's one soon. It's usually more like a coffee or just a mingler. And we often find new members that we align with. That gives us an opportunity to mentor or follow up with an individual. But we need more people to go out and be courageous enough to say, have you heard about Vote 411? And the last thing I wanted to share with Mary is the cost and everything else with our voter guide. It's just been a mess. But we get that out. We have not given up on it. We support that wholeheartedly, and we've actually expanded. So now you can access the voter guide on Libby through the library system. So the Metropolitan Columbus Library has a link. I mean, anybody can see it. And a lot of us are still page turners. And I know there are people who are page turners. We're going to need volunteers for that too. We get them in all the libraries, most of we just put those everywhere. And we want to continue doing it. When they're not out, or if they come out a little late, people look for us to complain. So let's give them something to be happy about and make sure they get out.
I like that. Thanks, Anna. Karen, back to you.
Yeah, I wanted to mention tacking on to what Mary was talking about, where some of the candidates aren't, responding. As I was talking to my nieces, I brought that up and I said, if a candidate doesn't respond, that's kind of telling too. Like, do they want to get their information out there or don't they? So, keep an eye on that if somebody doesn't respond.
Yes, exactly. All right. Any other comments? Okay, Kitty, back to you.
Yeah, just one. So many of our educational efforts are directed to members in the general public. And maybe there's a way to develop almost like not a train the trainers, but, invite organizations to send representatives to hear more about 411, figuring out disinformation, all of the things that we share with our members and individuals, but maybe we need to take an additional tack and do that with organizations and, build some partnerships that way too.
That's a good thought. Okay, any other comments? Sophia, go for it.
Sorry, I try to just be a listener, but I really liked, Kitty, what you said when you shared earlier about civil discourse. And it just reminds me of how I often have to remind myself to be very empathetic to others when I see things like misinformation, malinformation, or disinformation, and to not jump down somebody's throat and be corrective and be hostile and to approach situations with as much empathy and in a more educational stance as possible. And it makes me think about the first time I was corrected and I posted something on social media and somebody commented saying, I don't know if that's right. And the immediate feeling of wanting to defend myself and wanting to fight back, but turning back towards the situation as making it be a learning moment. And I'm appreciative for that person approaching me with empathy. So it's reminding me to approach others with empathy in order to have good civil discourse and to really make change and not just to continue a cycle of pushing people towards these outer boundaries where they feel like they need to continue spreading misinformation. So I want to keep the civil discourse conversation going because I like that a lot.
That's a great thought to end on. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Sophia. Before we wrap up, I'm going to give both Chelsey and Mary a chance to make any wrap-up remarks. Chelsey, any thoughts that you want to leave with us?
I just am grateful for you all, your willingness to be part of the network of trusted messengers to pushing back on mis and disinformation. It really does take the collective effort, and it's something that is part of our world now, and so we have to be better equipped at it. And I think doing that in community in our league is important. So just very implore you all to keep up the good work, and looking forward to sharing more Democracy Truth resources, webinars, resources, and information with you all as they become available.
Great. Thank you, Chelsey. Mary, any wrap-up remarks you'd like to make?
Well, it's not really a wrap-up remark, but I would just say that I really loved was it Kitty's idea about networking with other organizations, because it is true. It's hard for there are no mass media anymore. It's hard to reach the general public on anything, and working with individual groups, I think, would be really effective. And then this is part of sort of what Chelsey spoke of, trusted local messengers, and I think that's a great idea.
That's great. So I want to thank both Chelsey and Mary. I think your remarks were great tonight and very helpful, stimulating good thoughts about what do we do now. Thank you to everyone who attended tonight. Up on the screen, we have where you can learn more about the League of Women Voters at the national level, the state level, or the metro level. I think one of the most important things we can all do is continue to support the League of Women Voters and recruit new members. We have such an important job to do, and we actually have the talent and the skills and the resources to do a good job with it. So please get out there and recruit new members. And thank you all for attending tonight. And thank you, Sophia, for helping to pull this all together. All right.
Thank you,
everyone. Oh,
Thank you.
Thank
This
you.
was
Thank you.
quite good. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
thank you
you.
very
Thank you.
much.